This is the Invite Health Podcast, and I am Amanda Williams. On today's episode, I am going to get into some details on the Mediterranean diet. I talk about this so often and always telling people you should be adhering to a Mediterranean diet. But the question that usually comes back at me is, well, how do I achieve that? What foods should I include? And tell me a little bit more about the science behind the Mediterranean diet. So that's what I'm going to do for you today. I'm going to talk about what foods you should include, actually even walk you through a few different recipes, and talk about the actual science. Did you know that the Mediterranean diet is the most widely studied diet out there? And when it comes to all of the cumulative data, this is shown time and time again to be the most effective way to support your overall health. So we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about the health benefits and the clinical research studies that have been done. So I'm going to talk about all of these different factors that come into play when we are thinking about a Mediterranean diet. But before we get started, just a friendly reminder to you to subscribe to the Invite Health Podcast today. Remember, you can leave us a review. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And all of the information on today's episode will be linked in the episode description, and you can visit invitehealth.com/podcast for more information. So let's get right to it. I talk a lot about the Mediterranean diet, and I myself adhere to the Mediterranean diet. I didn't always, though. This is something that, I always say it's never too late to change your ways. And for me, growing up in the Midwest, I guess we kind of just followed that traditional Midwest diet. I didn't think that we were eating bad, but now looking back on it, yeah, probably not so great. When I look and recognize we probably didn't consume enough fresh fruits and vegetables, and we probably had more of those higher starched meals on a more frequent and regular basis. So when we think about the Mediterranean diet, this is basically, it's kind of a generic name of the traditional dietary patterns that individuals living in the Mediterranean region follow. So we think about all the different countries that border the Mediterranean Sea, and we recognize there that the foods, there's such an abundance of these really diverse, non-starchy vegetables, minimally processed foods. Remember, here in the United States, we love our processed foods. If you can't put it into a box or freeze it and put it into the frozen food section, oftentimes it gets overlooked. So that's a problem. That's why people here, when they did the test and they said, oh, wow, only 12% of Americans are technically metabolically healthy, which is a really horrible number. And that was a study out of University of North Carolina. That's just how bad the typical American diet is. So in the Mediterranean region, there's a higher consumption of real foods, having foods as they should be, having foods as they look normally. So not foods that have been modified, not foods that have been manipulated with, foods as they should be. So we're talking fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. We're looking at seeds and nuts and healthy oils and fats. All of these are very beneficial. And we look at the amount of vitamins and minerals and healthy fiber and protein that we can yield from all of these different foods, which is why there is so much scientific research backing and supporting the adherence to this style of eating. We understand that Mediterranean diets are not a processed diet. We understand that there's this huge diversity of these fresh vegetables that are consumed on an everyday basis. Not like, oh, well, today's Friday, I guess that's my day to eat my vegetables. No, every single day there is a great consumption of fresh vegetables. Same thing when we look at fresh fruits. When we think about fruits, oftentimes here, people may go a whole week or 2 weeks and never eat a fruit. And that's a really sad thing. When we follow a Mediterranean diet, fruits are part of your daily intake. And we look at the types of oils that are used, extra virgin olive oil, and understanding that things like nuts and seeds are in a way superfoods because they're giving you a full spectrum of vitamins and minerals and healthy fats and protein along with fiber. All of these make up a Mediterranean diet. Consumption of fatty fish, things like salmon, things like herring, sardines. So we recognize all this. a very low intake of red meat and processed meats. So we look at all of this, and then we look at all of the scientific research and how they've been able to directly correlate adherence to a Mediterranean diet and different disease states. And when people adhere to a Mediterranean diet, their risk of so many chronic diseases, diabetes, heart disease, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, all start to go down. Even cancers. So there's so much epidemiological evidence out there that supports this. But let's just walk through just some of the foods, because many times people say, well, what things should I include if I'm going shopping? What are the different foods that I should include on my list? So you want to look for things like cruciferous vegetables, your broccoli, your cauliflower, things like bok choy, Brussels sprouts, things that you recognize as quote unquote healthy because they're just the food itself. Now, you can fast forward that and you can say, okay, now let's look at the standard American diet version of that. Well, they take the Brussels sprout or they take the broccoli and then they, smother it in cheese and they put it in these different high fat, bad fat sauces and then they flash freeze it and you find it in your frozen food section. That's not the same. So we have to be choosing the actual real foods. Have things like garlic and onions and olives. All of these foods, spinach and kale, you name it, your green leafy vegetables. Think about all of the wonderful vitamins and minerals that you yield from this. I'm going to tell you a little bit more. I'm going to walk you through some more of the actual foods that you should include on your list. And then I'm going to walk you through a few different recipes and a typical day. Like, how is it that you should be eating a Mediterranean diet? What should you have for breakfast on most days? What should you be having for lunch and dinner? I'm going to walk you through all of those, and then I'm going to talk about the science. We're going to talk about the actual evidence that supports and backs the adherence to a Mediterranean diet. But we're going to take a quick break first.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the foods that you should be including. Then I'll walk you through some different recipes. We'll talk about what you can have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we're going to talk about the science, why it is so backed and supported by scientific evidence. So we talked about those green leafy vegetables. You have to think about all those wonderful nutrients that you can yield from those vegetables. Things like lutein, which is really great for your eyes and for your brain. But then you can also include things like mushrooms. We know mushrooms are incredibly beneficial and supportive for our immune system. And don't forget those bright orange-colored vegetables, things like carrots and peppers. All of these should be included into your routine. And then we look at the fruits. We're talking about all of those berries, those deep, dark, pigmented berries that are packed with all of those polyphenols, those powerful antioxidants. But don't forget things like apples and kiwis. Also can be incredibly nutritious. And then we look at things such as nuts and seeds. So include things like walnuts and almonds. You can look at foods like pine nuts and have lots of beans into your diet. But beans that are natural beans, not beans that have been loaded down with some type of artificial seasoning. to it. And then we want to make sure that we include different whole grains. So things like brown rice, oatmeal, quinoa. These are really easy things for you to incorporate. And don't forget all of those wonderful herbs and oils that you can be using. Extra virgin olive oil, grapeseed oil, avocado oil. Add in all of those herbs like oregano and parsley, cumin extract, turmeric, thyme. All of these can be so supportive to your overall health. So let's talk about a typical day. So most mornings, what you'd want to be doing is something such as oatmeal with fruit and nuts into it. Or maybe you would want to do something like yogurt with berries and a natural granola. So make sure that you're choosing fresh fruit instead of a fruit juice. And maybe a few mornings out of the week, you have eggs. And make your eggs fancy. Put lots of vegetables into those eggs. Maybe have a seeded bread with avocado and tomato on it. So those are the things that you want to be doing ideally for breakfast. And then for lunch, you want to play around with all those green leafy vegetables. Be creative with your salads. I always say, if you look down at your plate and it resembles more of a desert than it does a beautiful rainbow of colors, then you've done something wrong. Your foods should be artful and they should be bright, naturally bright, not bright because they've been pumped with artificial colors. So if your foods look like the desert, you've done something wrong. So keep that in mind. So be creative with your salads. Add seeds and nuts into your salad. Add fresh fruit into your salads. You can do something like grilled chicken or turkey, but add other things onto that. Have things like avocado, tomatoes, fresh greens. And then when it comes to dinner, it's going to be kind of mimicking what you would do for lunch. You want to have a plate that's filled with vegetables. You can do steamed vegetables. Think about all those cruciferous vegetables and all of the wonderful nutrients that come from that. Things like rice and beans. All of these are things that you want to include. And then, of course, you can obviously add in things like salmon. So let's look at a couple of different recipes. And just so you have just kind of a general idea, let's just look at a basic kind of a Mediterranean salad where you would have, your mixed greens. You put some tomatoes into that, some cucumbers, some purple onions. You even put some feta cheese into that. You can make your own vinaigrette with some sun-dried tomatoes, some balsamic vinegar. This is a really clean way to eat. It hasn't been processed. You can even make your own vegetarian black bean quinoa burgers if you wanted to, where you take a can of black beans, add in some onions, some garlic, chili powder. You can put a little bit of Himalayan salt into that, and then add in some cooked quinoa into that with an egg and mix that all together. These are not difficult recipes. Obviously, doing something like a roasted salmon that you would serve over a bed of beautiful greens. So it's a very easy thing to do. It's not that you have to go to cooking school and you have to become some type of a, Mediterranean chef by any means. This is not what the goal is. The goal is to walk into a grocery store and to recognize whole food, to select that whole food, and then to put it together for your meals. We need to get away from the high processed foods, the prepackaged foods. So the reason we want to do this is we know that a traditional Mediterranean diet is consistently showing how beneficial it can be to fighting chronic diseases. We certainly recognize that there are so many different things that can impact our health as we get older. We can look at emotional stress. We can look at physiological stress. We can certainly look at factors such as air pollution. We know all of these things can have a true negative impact on our lives. And then we can exacerbate all of this if we are not eating the right foods. So there's all of this accumulating data from all of these different epidemiological human clinical trials that have been able to show the preventive impact of the adherence to a Mediterranean diet when it comes to cardiovascular disease, when it comes to obesity, when it comes to type 2 diabetes, and understanding all of the true benefits that one can yield if they just adhere to this. So I want to tell you about some of the actual studies and just how effective it can be if you decide that you are going to make that change and start to eat healthy, how much of an impact that can make. But we're going to take a quick break, so we will be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit invitehealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's invitehealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. Let's talk about some of the science. Let's look at some of these population-based epidemiological studies that have shown that adherence to a Mediterranean diet can have these protective effects against cardiovascular disease, stroke, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancers, different allergic diseases. And now they've actually shown how effective and beneficial it can be for neurological health. So when we're talking about things like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. So there was a really large study involving over 22,000 men and women who had a higher adherence to a traditional Mediterranean diet. And this was associated with a significant lower total cardiac and cancer mortality. Now, all of this information is information that I'm pulling from a major study that was published in the Journal of Gerontology, talking about the health benefits of Mediterranean diet, the metabolic and molecular mechanisms to this. So that's a large study. So 22,000 men and women, and those who had the highest adherence to a traditional Mediterranean diet had a significant lower risk of cardiac and cancer mortality. Now, there was another study that they did, and this looked at over 2,300 European men and women between the ages of 70 and 90 years old with a strong adherence to a Mediterranean diet. And they found this association with a 23% lower rate of all-cause mortality in those who followed this type of a diet. So we understand that in this diet, we are getting high fiber, which is beneficial across the board when it comes to maintaining your blood glucose, when it comes to maintaining healthy cholesterol transport. I often will give the example of when they have done MRI imaging and they've looked at people who adhere to a Mediterranean diet versus those who follow a standard American diet. And the alarming thing is when they do these brain images, they can see greater rate of atrophy or brain shrinking in those who follow a standard American diet. So we say you have two choices. You have these two different lines. One is the, aging brain that's beautiful and healthy, and the other is the brain that's loaded up with sugary beverages and processed foods. And you can see the actual images. You cannot fight that. There is so much evidence out there that continuously shows the cardiac benefits, the blood glucose benefits. There was a study called the Pretty Med study. And in this, they were doing this randomized trial on the effects of the Mediterranean diet. And they were giving people this strict guidelines as to how to prepare their foods. And then they followed up with them over a 5-year time span. And in this, they found that the group that was adhering to this Mediterranean diet had a significant reduction in 3 major cardiovascular events. So when you're looking at things like coronary heart disease and high blood pressure and myocardial infarctions, which is a heart attack, and those who adhered to the Mediterranean diet had this lower incidence of all of those, lower incidence of peripheral artery disease, lower incidence of atrial fibrillation. So we already know all of this, and we understand that the mechanism in which a traditional Mediterranean diet exerts its benefits work across the board when it comes to cellular support. We understand that we get these cardiovascular benefits by having these lipid lowering effects, so maintaining healthier cholesterol, by having protection against oxidative stress and inflammation, and understanding that chronic inflammation is the driving force to every single chronic disease out there. And also understanding the immune system support that we are getting that helps to regulate, once again, the inflammatory response, because the gut microbiota is so supported by those healthy foods that are contained in a Mediterranean diet. So we see all of this. We see the genomic stability that is created. So at that cellular DNA area, we understand that we maintain healthier cholesterol, that we have increased insulin sensitivity to better regulate any spike in our blood glucose, being able to fend off oxidative stress because we have all of these vitamins and minerals. So let's talk about another study. This was in the British Medical Journal, talking about the adherence to a Mediterranean diet and health status. So this was a meta-analysis. So once again, they were looking at a whole series of different studies that were focused in on the Mediterranean diet. So they looked at 12 different studies. And this populated data from over 1.5 million people. And in this meta-analysis, they said that greater adherence to a Mediterranean diet is associated with a significant improvement in health status, as seen by a significant reduction in overall mortality, mortality from cardiovascular disease, incidence of mortality from cancer, and incidence of Parkinson's disease, as well as Alzheimer's. These results seem to be clinically relevant for public health, in particular for encouraging a Mediterranean-like dietary pattern for the primary prevention of major chronic diseases. I have to repeat that line that they found from this meta-analysis of over 1.5 million people. The results seem to be clinically relevant for public health, in particular for encouraging a Mediterranean-like dietary pattern for primary prevention of major chronic diseases. Wow, that's a powerful statement to come from clinical research. So I do go on and on about adhere to a Mediterranean diet. You have to make sure you make those changes. Eat real foods. I say this based off of the science. We understand the impact. We have seen the benefits in the heart, in the brain. You can't deny the brain imaging. And the only difference between those brain imaging is the foods that the people are eating. So you have this atrophy or the shrinking of the brain, the losing of the fats in the brain in those who follow a standard American diet versus someone who adheres to a Mediterranean diet and they have this beautiful brain as it ages. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the science behind a Mediterranean diet, but we're going to take another quick break. We'll be right back.
This podcast is brought to you by InviteHealth.com. For over 20 years, Invite Health has provided premium quality supplements and expert advice you can trust. Now, first-time customers can enjoy an exclusive offer. Visit InviteHealth.com/podcast or click the link in this episode description. That's InviteHealth.com/podcast for your exclusive offer on Invite Health products. Invite Health offers the resources you need to make important decisions about your health. Chat live with degreed healthcare professionals, get product information, and find retail locations near you at invitehealth.com. You can also learn about our new genetic testing program and our exclusive Invite Fitness Wellness program. Follow Invite Health on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast today. Now back to our episode.
And welcome back. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about some of the protective effects of adherence to a traditional Mediterranean diet. Let's talk about oxidative stress and inflammation. We certainly understand that when we have a higher consumption of real foods, so fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, seeds and nuts, and healthy fats coming from things like extra virgin olive oil, that these are going to be really rich in powerful antioxidants and vitamins and minerals that can be so protective to that buildup of reactive oxygen species in the body that do significant damage. We understand that if we have an inadequate intake of dietary antioxidants, that this can increase our risk for developing plaques in our arteries. We understand that if we test our oxidized LDL, which is your low-density lipoprotein, if we look at that level and we see a high rate of oxidation, then we know our diet is failing us and we are not getting adequate antioxidants to keep up with the oxidative demand. And we know that oxidative and inflammatory damage are both directly correlated with endothelial dysfunction, which is the main step in the pathogenesis of atherosclerosis. So if we can use foods as our medicine, we should be doing that. You can go back and think about "Let food be thy medicine" from Hippocrates. And we really should be. We shouldn't be always looking to the one simple fix of a pill that's made in some lab. We should be thinking about what we are doing every day when it comes to our foods. Now, the American Journal of Medicine, they published some findings of the Mediterranean diet, its components, and cardiovascular disease. And they said one of the best studied diets for cardiovascular health is the Mediterranean diet. This consists of fish. This consists of healthy oils such as olive oil, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts. The Mediterranean diet has been shown to reduce the burden or even prevent the development of cardiovascular disease, breast cancer, depression, colorectal cancer, diabetes, obesity, asthma, erectile dysfunction, and cognitive decline. This diet is also known to improve surrogates of cardiovascular disease, such as waist-to-hip ratio, lipid levels, which is your cholesterol, and markers of inflammation. So we're talking about things like high sensitivity C-reactive protein and homocysteine levels, as well as primary cardiovascular disease outcomes. These enhancements easily rival those seen with more established tools to fight cardiovascular disease, such as beta blockers and angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors. So they're saying here, the Mediterranean diet is doing all of the things that these medications that they're trying to use, but it's doing it even better because it's focused on every aspect of the human body. It is such a powerful thing, understanding that when we look at all of the different pathways in our body and we understand how everything is interconnected when it comes to our chemical messengers, also known as our hormones, when we think about the immune system and 70% of that being located in the intestines, if we are feeding our intestines good, healthy, prebiotic fibers coming from fruits and vegetables, then you can now imagine why the immune system is more ready to fend off any type of a pathogen. So we know it can target inflammation. We know it helps to support the gut microbiota. We certainly recognize all of the many impacts that a Mediterranean diet can have. And it's not difficult to adhere to. When we think about fresh fruits and vegetables, it's not like they're impossible to find. I'm pretty sure every grocery store has fresh fruits and vegetables. When we think about swapping out the bad oils with something such as extra virgin olive oil, when we think about snacking on things like nuts and seeds instead of those potato chips or bad crackers, when we think about making a salad and putting walnuts on that salad or sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds, this is much better than reaching for that bag of croutons. When we think about passing those processed foods and going with wild-caught salmon, all of these things can make a huge difference in our overall health, for our heart, for our brain, for our overall sense of well-being. Adhering to a Mediterranean diet is going to be that key to successful dieting, to successful heart health, to successful healthy aging. We want to be able to reduce our risk for heart disease and cancer and type 2 diabetes and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. And the more we adhere to that Mediterranean diet, the better likelihood we have in doing it. The science continues to show it over and over. So that is all that I have for you today. I hope that you walk away from this understanding a little bit more about how easy it is to just make that change and follow that Mediterranean diet. Not a difficult thing to do, and understand all of the positive health benefits that you can bring to your own body just from the foods that you are eating. And remember, there's also other ways that you can incorporate these things in. You can always have higher polyphenols by having something like Cocoa HX or the Reds HX, the Greens HX, all of these powerful plant-based antioxidants that are packed with vitamins and minerals that can help to optimize our overall cellular health. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our podcasts for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. And make sure that you subscribe. You can leave us a review and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. We will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.